Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Top 10 players for this Colorado Buffaloes program heading into the 2024 season. And I think my biggest takeaway from stacking these top 10 players is that this roster is in a massively better spot than it was 12 months ago when we were talking about this team. And you go back 12 months, Colorado going into year one with Coach Prime, and you said the top end talent of this Colorado program is just about as good as you see in the country, right? Shedeur Sanders, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Travis Hunter, quite possibly the best player in college football. But outside of those top five players, this roster last year had a very big drop off. And you take a look at the top 10 players for this program heading into 2024 and say, all right, they still have the top end players, right? Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, all back. But you start looking at 5 through 20 and say, this Colorado team has a lot of really quality depth to it, which in my mind separates it, kind of sets it apart from what we saw in 2023. Fired up to get into it. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Colorado fans. Y'all know I've had a blast talking this program since Coach Prime has taken over, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, the transfer portal. Y'all continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the boys. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, so many different players that you could put in this top 10 list. I would love to hear some players that you guys think I'm sleeping on heading into 2024. I always learn a ton from you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with, a couple of my guys that I did not include in my top 10, but guys that I think could break out for this program in 2024, starting with two true freshmen. Obviously, one, Jordan Seaton, where we check back in the middle of October. There is a very good chance we're talking about the best offensive lineman for this Colorado program. And the second one I want to talk about is Draylon Miller. And for the Colorado fans who've been listening for the last couple of weeks and months, we've talked a lot about Draylon Miller kind of being, I'm going to make kind of a crazy comp, but the Deebo Samuel of this Colorado offense, a guy that you can get incorporated in so many different ways. And I think has year one impact ability as a true freshman. And then a couple of transfers that I just wanted to shout out. One, Quincy Wiggins coming from LSU, arguably the most intriguing transfer that Colorado brought in. This was a former top 50 national prospect coming out of high school. Played a lot of basketball during his high school days, so I think he's still getting adjusted to the sport of football, only going into year three. I wonder if we see Quincy Wiggins, kind of find his stride. And if he, in fact, does, you're looking at a top 10 player for this Colorado program. Rayan Buell, really, really impressive kid from the University of Ohio. Left him off the list because you want to see him take it from the MAC to the Power 5 level. But if he does as well, you're looking at a difference maker on the defensive line. And then former Ohio State running back Dallin Hayden, who I think certainly could be one of the better running backs in the conference this year, just giving a little bit more opportunity, which he didn't really have during his first 2 years at Ohio State. And without further ado, let's get into the top 10 players. And I'm going to start with Jimmy Horn Jr. And again, I think this highlights how good this Colorado roster is. Jimmy Horn Jr. coming in at 10. This is not me knocking Jimmy Horn Jr. It's much more giving some flowers to some guys that I put above Jimmy Horn Jr. Really solid for Colorado last year. You take a look at some of the numbers that really impressed me. Led the team with 6 touchdowns, was really good in the red zone. And you look at Jimmy Horn Jr. and say, one, the connection, the chemistry between Jimmy Horn Jr. and Shedeur Sanders was evidently there in 2023. You're going to see that same kind of vibe in 2024, but perfect fit in this Colorado offense that's designed to get the ball out quick to your playmakers and let them operate after the catch. Jimmy Horn Jr., one of the better wide receivers after the catch in all of college football last year. I think he's going to have just another really, really solid year for this Colorado program. Going to number 9, and this is my guy. And for the Colorado fans that listened when we broke down DJ McKinney, I think this kid can be an absolute stud for Colorado. And I have him number 9, which is probably a lot higher than a lot of Colorado fans would have him. But I think he could be a top 5 player on this team. You take a look at the physical traits that you're looking for in a cornerback. DJ McKinney has those traits. He's long, he's physical. You take a look back at the year at Oklahoma State last year, a 45% completion percentage when targeted, 49 targets, gave up less than 25 catches. This is a cornerback that I think has shown he can do it in the Big 12 last year at Oklahoma State. And I think he comes in and can really be a lockdown cornerback on the boundary for Colorado. Physical freak. I am fired up for my guy, DJ McKinney, coming in at number 8. Safety Shiloh Sanders. And this was a safety that won game-changing plays. But you talk about that pick 6 against Colorado State. Shiloh Sanders, he's got that capability. And that's what you want in that safety position. He's extremely experienced. He's extremely versatile. And I think largely the leader of that Colorado defense. He's kind of the tone setter. He led the team in tackles last year. And when you can find safeties that can come up and not just not be a liability in the run game, but be a force in the run game, that's absolutely massive, because the modern day of college football defense, you want as much coverage and athleticism on the field as you can get just to kind of counteract what offenses are trying to do. But that coverage ability, you have to have those guys come up and tackle. You look at someone like Kermani McClain last year. All right, he was solid in coverage. He could not tackle, and he was a liability. And you saw teams really try to force Kermani McClain to tackle, and that was a massive problem. You look at Shiloh Sanders in the back end and say, this is a guy that you can throw up in the box and be kind of that third linebacker. He can play that nickel spot. He can play the free safety. He can do so many different things, but having a physical presence at that safety position, absolutely massive for this Colorado defense. And coming in at number 7, and a guy that I might be a little bit low on, one of my favorite transfer portal additions, former Arizona State edge rusher BJ Green. One, versatile. He can play that edge. He can play and kick on inside. He is, 6'1", 270. He is built like a fire hydrant. You guys kind of see that in the picture. Extremely disruptive, right? 39 tackles, 11 and a half TFL, 6 sacks. But then you start looking at the in-depth number and say 34 quarterback hurries. That was such a problem for Colorado last year, was getting a pass rush with their front 4 on the defensive line. You look back at last year for Colorado, their leading contributor in terms of quarterback hurries, impacting the quarterback, was Jordan Dominic. And he only had 18 quarterback hurries. BJ Green almost doubles that. Coming to Colorado, he can hold up in the run game as well. I think you talk about where Colorado needed to kind of close that gap along the line of scrimmage. BJ Green is going to play a massive role in closing the gap along the line of scrimmage. And going to number 6, wide receiver Will Sheppard from Vanderbilt. And another guy that I didn't come in during spring. So I think that kind of contributes to maybe some people sleeping on him. And take a look at the career numbers for Will Sheppard at Vanderbilt. 152 catches for over 2,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, had 14 contested catches last year for Vanderbilt. He was a guy that, hey, we're just going to throw it up to Will Sheppard and hope for the best. And he largely came down with a lot of passes. And you look at his quarterback play during his time at Vanderbilt, it certainly was not Shedeur Sanders back there throwing the rock. And I think most importantly, Will Sheppard brings another element to this wide receiver room. You have guys like Jimmy Horn Jr., who we talked about, like LeJounte Wester, who we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. You had guys, I guess you should say you have guys that can create separation, especially in those short intermediate route trees. You didn't really have that big body boundary target. Amarian Miller kind of provided that as a true freshman, but what you get in Will Sheppard's a guy that's done it for 3 straight seasons at the SEC level. And I think having somebody that can really put a lot of stress on opposing defenses attacking downfield, not only are they going to have to respect Will Sheppard, but because they're respecting Will Sheppard, guys like Jimmy Horn Jr., LeJounte Wester, Travis Hunter, they are going to have kind of a field day in that underneath short intermediate route tree. I think Will Sheppard not only going to bring production to this Colorado offense, but I think going to help some other wide receivers find some more space to operate in that passing attack. Big fan of Will Sheppard going into our top 5. And another one of my guys for the Colorado fans that have been listening for quite a while, when he committed to Colorado, I'm fired up about this kid. And I think a lot of times nickel cornerbacks get overlooked. It is such an important position. You need nickel cornerbacks to do so many different things at the college football level. And a very similar conversation we had with Shiloh Sanders, where you're bringing on this coverage ability, this athleticism onto the field. You have to have those guys be able to be present in the run game. Preston Hodge is certainly that guy. Only a 9% missed tackle rate going back to his time at Liberty. Extremely sticky from that nickel cornerback spot. Elite short area quickness. He knows how to break on the football. I think Preston Hodge is going to be a big-time weapon in this Colorado defense, and I think that's what probably really excites you about Preston Hodge is all the different ways that you can kind of get him utilized in this Colorado defense. And going to number 4, and we're going to talk about LeJohntay Wester, and I think you take a look at the spring game from Colorado and say LeJohntay Wester is going to be a feature in this Colorado offense. In kind of a very similar way, we talked about Jimmy Horn Jr. You need wide receivers that can create separation early and operate after the catch. That's what Shedeur Sanders does best. You talk about accuracy, getting the ball out quick. When Shedeur Sanders is in rhythm, that's when he's playing at his best. And you have a bunch of wide receivers that are going to allow him to play in rhythm. And you look at LeJohntay Wester, I mean, just in 2023 alone, over 108 catches, over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns on the career, 250 catches for 2,700 yards. He's a quarterback-friendly wide receiver that can operate after the catch, but I think most importantly, create separation very quickly in his route tree. And again, that's exactly what Colorado wants to do on the offensive side of the football. And getting into our top 3, I'm going to go to another transfer from Pitt, Dayon Hayes. You talk about Colorado trying to beef up that defensive line in 2 different departments. One, we got to be able to stop the run better. Dayon Hayes with 19 run stops certainly does that, but then getting after the passer, similar to BJ Green, Dayon Hayes in 29 quarterback hurries that led Pitt last year, a 13% pass rush win rate. Thought was the best edge rusher on Pitt last year. Samuel Okunlola, who's also at Colorado, not on this list, was probably their second best pass rusher. I think your biggest takeaway is Dayon Hayes is a difference maker on the defensive line, but you start looking at the depth that Colorado has compiled on that defensive line. I think that's probably what fires you up the most. Now, our top 2 players, and I'll preface that y'all know who the top 2 players are going to be. You can stack these 2 guys really any way you want it. I wouldn't argue with you. I went Travis Hunter at 2, and when you talk about Travis Hunter, he might be the best player in college football and certainly one of the most rare players that we've seen play this college football sport. And I mean, how many times do we talk about a guy that is second in the team in receiving yards, second in the team in touchdown passes caught, and then first in the team in interceptions and pass breakups? I mean, he is a legitimate star at 2 different positions. And I think the challenge, or I guess the idea for Coach Prime, is how can we best utilize Travis Hunter where we can optimize him on both sides of the football. But when you talk about Travis Hunter, he is an All-American caliber wide receiver. He is an All-American caliber defensive back. When you have an All-American caliber guy at 2 different positions providing you value on both sides of the football, that is, we haven't really seen it done before in the last 2 decades. So Travis Hunter, obviously extremely special. And then going to number 1, and that's going to be Shedeur Sanders. And for the Colorado fans who've been listening for the last couple of weeks, months, I'm a massive fan of Shedeur Sanders. I don't know how many quarterbacks I'm taking over Shedeur Sanders in the country. And when you start talking about Shedeur, I think the thing that stands out to me the most is this kid's a gamer. Like, he's wired between the ears just the right way. He had, one of the worst offensive lines, if not the worst offensive line at the Power 5 level last year, still put up some unbelievable numbers for this Colorado offense. Clearly was playing banged up. And then you talk about what he does as a quarterback. I think he balances pushing the ball down the field, making those big-time NFL caliber plays, but also being a guy that takes care of the football. And you don't normally see that. You see a lot of quarterbacks that might have a really high completion percentage, but just are kind of scared pushing the ball down the field. A lot of check downs, a lot of short intermediate route trees. And then you see quarterbacks that they have those big arms. They're not afraid to put the ball in harm's way, but then they're turning the ball over. I think Shedeur Sanders balances that out extremely well, where he's attacking downfield. He's making those NFL caliber throws into small windows, but not turning the ball over. And that's what you're looking for from a quarterback. And I think what's most exciting is you see the numbers on the screen. When he was kept clean last year, which was not often enough, 77% completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. If you can find a way to protect Shedeur Sanders, potentially give him a little bit more of a run game, we all know Shedeur Sanders is a stud. If you can kind of give that to him, I think he's going to take it up another notch in 2024. That'll do it for our top 10. I think we left out a lot of really good players. And again, that highlights why I'm relatively high on this Colorado team is I think the depth of this team is in a much better spot. They kept the top end talent. That top end talent stayed in Colorado, but they added a lot of quality depth into that first and two deep on the both sides of the football. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.